Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the National Press Club. My name is Andrea Edney. I'm the president of the National Press Club, the world's leading organization for journalists. And I am also an editor at Bloomberg News. Along with the National Press Club Journalism Institute, we are so excited to host the launch of Press Forward. So excited. This wonderful initiative, as I'm sure many of you in this room already know, aims to create a safe and fair work environment for women and elevate their status in the workplace. The organization values quality data and nonpartisanship and aims to create a healthy workplace for women and men. The founders are going to tell you more, but before they do, allow me to tell you a little bit more about them. Carolyn McGurty-Supple is a co-founder and co-lead of Press Forward. She began her career at ABC News, where she was a desk assistant for World News, a production assistant for Barbara Walters, and an associated producer for Focus Earth with Bob Woodruff. She studied journalism at Cal Poly and received a master's in public policy from Harvard University. She's currently a leader in Booz Allen Hamilton's San Francisco practice. Lara Sitrakian is a co-founder of Press Forward and CEO of News Deeply. Her team's inaugural site, Syria Deeply, launched in 2012 and won the Excellence in Online Journalism Award from the National Press Foundation. They went on to launch Ebola Deeply, Water Deeply, Refugees Deeply, and many others. The model is expanding to cover topics in public health, environmental science, and social impact. Before launching News Deeply, Lara was correspondent for ABC News and Bloomberg Television covering the Middle East. Thank you for being here, all of you. Thank you for being here, all of you. We are so excited and happy to host this. Before we continue, I'd like to introduce Barbara Cochran, who is the board president of the National Press Club Journalism Institute. Barbara.
Well, let me echo Andrea's excitement. This is really so significant for us. We're so happy to have all of you here. The Journalism Institute of the National Press Club is its educational arm, and that's very significant for this gathering today because our mission is to help professionals and also the rising generation of journalists as they come into the world. That's something I do in my day job. I'm the director of the Washington program of the Missouri School of Journalism and the Curtis Hurley Chair in Public Affairs Journalism. And so I'm dealing with students every day. And one of the things that is most exciting to me is that we have been talking with Press Forward about generating a program that will go to campuses and that will help young people who are going into internships and taking that first job in their careers and giving them some tools that they can use to make sure that they take that big step and make that adjustment in an atmosphere that's free from harassment. So with that, I will turn it over to Carolyn and Lara, and we'll have a wonderful discussion. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much to Andrea Edney and Betsy Fisher-Martin, Julie Hsu, Lindsay Underwood, and all at the National Press Club Journalism Institute who helped us bring this together in 3 short weeks, and we're grateful for your support and excited for your ongoing collaboration. And thank you so much to all of the supporters and friends and family who came today, and those who have been supportive of our journey from the beginning.
We have many more introductions to come from this incredible group of women that launched Press Forward and is part of its forward trajectory. We have a lot to cover, so we're going to move this along swiftly. First, we're going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing at Press Forward, show you a short video, then have everyone introduce themselves and share a brief word on why they came forward and formed this initiative. We'll also share a bit about our pillars of work, the information resources on our website, and our stellar advisory board, who will meet later on today. We'll also introduce our partners who are helping us scale the impact of all these initiatives across newsrooms nationwide. After that, we've got a sure-to-be interesting panel discussion moderated by Judy Woodruff, one of our esteemed advisory board members, with a cast of news and legal industry voices helping us make sense of what comes next. And we will be sure to leave time for Q&A.
So what is Press Forward? Press Forward is an initiative to stop sexual harassment and assault in newsrooms, to create safe and healthy workplaces that have great values for women and men, and all of this is important to ensure the integrity of the press. Getting this right is critical to the future of the news. The American press speaks truth to the American people, and until journalists, women and men alike, can work in an environment that's civil and respectful, fair and free of sexual harassment, innuendo, and assault, we really can't do our jobs and successfully deliver on the most basic of American constitutional values. And so now is really, at this watershed moment, time for lasting culture change in media. And by working together, we really hope that we can press forward.
We do this in a spirit of service. This is an all-volunteer core of women distributed across time zones who have one thing in common. They care about the freedom and the future of the press. We happen to be a kind of alumni network of women who've been through some creepy and abusive behavior. Some of us ended up leaving the industry partly as a result of that toxic culture. Others carved out our own space within it. But for all of us, the goal is now to look forward and press forward in finding solutions to the issues of sexual assault and toxic workplace behavior. The wave of Me Too revelations hopefully marked the end of certain norms and practices. But where the pendulum lands depends on us, all of us, in this room and beyond these walls. There are more than a few ways you can get involved as a supporter, a donor, a member of this effort, as we help shape the media industry for good. But more on all that later. To get this conversation started, we want to show you this inspiring video by one of our co-founders, Gloria Riviera of ABC News.
What time is it? What time is it?
Last fall, the watershed moment the world witnessed gave us at Press Forward our mission.
And the litany of allegations continued to grow this week as more and more women came forward charging powerful men with sexual misconduct. It has sparked a national conversation from Hollywood to Capitol Hill in corporate boardrooms and kitchen tables all across the country. The question now, will all this talk bring real change?
Overnight, more fallout from accusations of sexual abuse and harassment in the news industry.
I am a victim of sexual abuse. It's really not an easy thing to let yourself believe that.
And yet, millions are finding the courage to do so. In the 48 hours alone after the Me Too movement launched, Twitter users posted the hashtag 1 million times, while 12 million people reacted on Facebook.
When situations like that happen to women, you fear that it's going to be your fault. You're not going to be believed. You're going to lose your job.
This is a moment that demands a frank and honest assessment about where we stand and more generally the safety of women. Let me be very clear. There is no excuse for this alleged behavior.
At Press Forward, that frank and honest assessment of the news industry, where our shared experiences brought us together, is our goal. Concrete solutions, the end game, for right now and for the future.
There is a change coming, and I can see it, and I can feel it. But it doesn't make it any easier to talk about those kinds of things because no one talks about it until it happens.
We've met journalism students who are already dealing with this.
It made me feel really uncomfortable, and the problem was that I went the whole day thinking about it and thinking, well, maybe that's just him. Why should I have to say that it was me? Why should I have to say that I misinterpreted it? Why can't I really recognize the fact that someone else made me feel uncomfortable? I think that if there was a group, like a sorority type of feel for men and women, just to feel like they're not alone and that it's not a secret and it's not something you should hide. As a young female professional, entering the workforce, I want to feel like I can get as far as I can get without conditions. Now people are saying no. Who I am as a person is valuable, is important, and I can demand that respect.
We agree, and we're ready to get to work because it's time to press forward.
My name is Diana Pierce Burgess, and before I introduce this wonderful group of women here on the stage, I'd like to say a few words about the group. Facebook and WhatsApp are a wonderful thing. If it weren't for social media and messaging, I truly wonder if any of us would ever have met. Our conversation started on a chat group titled Silver Linings, but most of us didn't know each other. And a few of us actually just met this morning, believe it or not. And yet, here we were trying to define who we are and what we want to be. We discovered we have a wide range of ages, we have very different political views, and we're scattered across the globe, from San Francisco to Denver to South Carolina to London and Nairobi. We are career women. We are mothers. We are wives. We are sisters, and we are daughters. We have toddlers, and we have teens. We have very supportive families. And we are fiercely protective of one another. And above all, we have one thing in common, and that is beyond this conversation of Me Too, we realized we have more to do. I suspect many of us would rather be somewhere else today. I don't think it's been very easy for any of us, having to tell our story to our families, juggle our day jobs, and have all of this across different time zones. But it's too important to ignore. The common thread is that we truly believe that we are at a pivotal moment in time where the cultural norms of the past are no longer acceptable. We also recognize the power of a collective voice and believe that now is the time to be heard. So now I'd like to introduce you to some of the women of Press Forward and let them tell you what's driven them to be here today and what changes they hope to see.
Hi again. My name is Lara Strakin, and I'm here because I truly believe the future of our profession, of our industry, can be bright, innovative in substance and formats, with new business models, with everything that we hope to see across the industry. But we can't get there unless we have everyone's talents on board, across gender and all backgrounds. Diversity at work. I wanted to be part of this effort to make sure that that inner transformation takes place so that we have high-performing media outlets filled with high-performing journalists who had a chance to rise as individuals on their talents and capabilities, because I would like to see our industry become a race to the top.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Carrie Weeks, and this is a moment in time when newsrooms and other industries can choose to put a Band-Aid on the wound caused by pervasive sexual harassment and simply make promises to adhere to the existing policies and laws. But this won't be giving the issue the medicine it needs to heal from the inside. Without taking a deeper look under the skin and determining what policies and systems allowed this wound to spread across the surface, all while those laws and policies were in place, then the problem will fester and boil to the surface again in the future. One thing I keep hearing from women of an older generation is that they thought they solved this problem in the 70s. These brave women fought hard and accomplished a lot, but the work is not done. These women here on this stage want to make a difference for the next generation, or else all of our daughters will be faced with these same challenges when they enter the workforce as intelligent, ambitious, and hardworking young women. All women deserve to be rewarded for those qualities, not exploited because of them. So I left my career in news behind at age 25. Though I did that, I'm keenly interested in the findings of our study in the industry blueprint deliverable, so that we can scale those findings across industries and affect change on a much larger scale beyond just the news industry, so that no young woman has to face this issue no matter what industry they choose to work in.
My name is Shannon Van Sant. I am a journalist. I started out at ABC News and then spent more than a decade, having just returned from reporting in China and throughout Africa, based in Beijing, for CBS and PBS and other outlets. And I was warned in the lead up to this day by family members, also by colleagues in the media industry, to not participate. I had people tell me that this would impact my career and that I would be rocking the boat. And I know that it took years for many of my co-founders to have the courage and for there to be a space in this country for them to tell their stories. As journalists, we're supposed to be a voice for the voiceless, but yet all of us up here didn't have a voice for so long. The issue of violence against women or any marginalized group, whether that's verbal abuse or sexual harassment or assault, it should not be a controversial issue. This should not even be up for debate. There should be zero tolerance for this in our newsrooms. At the age of 18, I became an assistant. I was invited to be an assistant to one of the men in broadcast news who's been accused. And if somebody had told me then, when I was a student at Wellesley College, that I'd be sitting here today at the National Press Club talking about what we're talking about today, I would be shocked. But my thinking transformed over my years, the beginning of my career in the industry, to the extent that when a couple of years ago, a reporter from the New York Times, I mentioned to her casually that my former boss had routinely sexually assaulted women. And she said, "This is a big story. Can I pass it on to one of our reporters?" And I said to her, I said, "Sure, I'm happy to talk about it. But you're wrong. This is not a story. This is routine. This happens all the time. This was an open secret. And this is not news. You're just naive. You're young." Obviously, I was wrong. And she taught me a lot. This issue has had ripple effects and reverberatory effects for all of our careers and lives. And when I was overseas in China and Africa, the main focus of many of my stories was human rights. And I came away from that experience with the conviction that a key barometer of the health of a community and a society, a country, a corporation, a group, is the safety and the security and the well-being of the most vulnerable members of that group. And so what we aim to do here is to study and come up with mechanisms so that the most vulnerable members of our newsrooms can work in a place where they feel inspired and strong and elevated and safe. And lastly, I think something we'll also look at is the issue of foreign correspondents overseas. The issues we face here are infinitely more complex outside of this country's borders, and we also need to try to create a space and be an example from women living all around the world. Violence against women, I think, is viewed as a lesser crime, and we hope to be an example here to change that.
Thank you all for being here today. My name is Diana May, and I was 23 years old when I started working at World News Tonight, and I later became an assignment editor on the news desk at ABC. It was a heady and very exhilarating time, fast-paced, electrifying, exhausting, and precisely where I wanted to be. I was helping to tell stories with the best and the brightest in the industry. And I think back with great fondness and gratitude on the many journalists, fine journalists and producers, men and women alike, with whom I worked. But I'm here today because, like my fellow joyous warriors here on stage, I was also subjected to abhorrent behavior in the newsroom that left me feeling ashamed, embarrassed, and powerless. But after decades of reflection, I now know that this behavior is not just about one individual acting badly, as I initially thought. It was the result of a leadership vacuum that permitted it to happen, a leadership system that I believe valued ratings over human decency. I'm a lawyer now, but my primary job is raising my two young sons. And to me, that means growing them into men who are respectful and kind and honest, empathetic, and fair, who will stand up for people, for others when they need help, and who, in parenting vernacular, make good choices. And perhaps the most salient point is that I hold them accountable for their actions. And perhaps I'm naive, but I don't think it's unrealistic to expect industry executives, expect of them what we expect of our children. And I'm here today because I feel there needs to be fundamental change in how leadership and management operate. I want leaders to lead by setting cultural thresholds and examples where respect and fairness and good choices and accountability are a part of the industry DNA, and abusive behavior will not be tolerated. Journalists need to have confidence that there's a system in place that holds wrongdoers accountable, irrespective of their position or power. A system that empowers people to speak up about offensive behavior without fear of retaliation and the expectation that they will be heard and believed. I envision a system that recognizes and acts as if no one employee is above the law, and a system that believes every person deserves respect, regardless of their position. And I envision a system that did not exist when I was at ABC News, but that's why I'm here today.
My name is Carolyn McGordy-Supple, and I'm a very private person, so it's very hard to be on the stage. So I'll just throw it out there. I'm going to be emotional, and I'm sorry. The first time I set foot in the National Press Club was when I was in high school. I was about to become editor of my high school paper. I was 15 years old. I was a paper girl. I grew up watching Peter Jennings, who was my hero. And after college, I studied journalism, and I landed my dream job at World News at ABC. I had an extraordinary experience. I had wonderful mentors, including many men. But because of the culture in television, including sexual harassment, I left. There are many reasons that made me pivot my career, and I still believe in the news. And I went into management consulting at Booz Allen to learn how to lead and manage organizations that are being digitally disrupted, maybe because of something like this would happen today, that I would be able to stand up and empower people to change the world and show what great values look like and show you what great leadership and management looks like, and it takes a lot of courage. And now I know why these women were called Times Persons of the Year, and Silence Breakers were called Persons of the Year, because they all sacrificed so much. So thank you for being here with me in this moment. Today, I want to speak to those who may have been hurt by someone who is in a position of power. I want to tell you that if you feel that you don't belong, that you do. And you can become a successful journalist, no matter where you came from, what you look like, or who you know. And what matters most is that you stay true to yourself and do great reporting and uphold the mission of the press. Whew, I feel so good to get that out. I think the worst thing that can happen in this moment is that sexual harassment becomes politicized or is seen simply as a gender issue. It's not. It's a human decency issue. And when people go to work, they should be treated with dignity and respect. And laws that protect people from this type of behavior should be upheld. The hard work of intrepid journalists have unveiled that there are leaders in newsrooms who abuse their power, people who sexually harass and assault others, and particularly people who are younger or ones who have a lower status in the office or are more vulnerable. It's the job of the press to be the voice to the voiceless and hold the powerful to the account, and they've done their job. But the minute that we have newsroom leaders who believe that some people matter and some people don't, we're in trouble. Because how can we possibly make our audiences believe that we care about them if we don't care about everyone in the newsroom? And to me, that's been the most egregious part of this story, is that the most vulnerable in the profession have been hurt the most. And it's the job of the press to be a voice to the voiceless and hold the powerful to account, even when it means that painful introspection and acknowledgement of our own failings. Many news organizations have acted swiftly in an attempt to get this right. But to solve this problem, we must dig deeper and ask, why is there a lack of safety for so many? And how have a few predatory individuals been enabled and empowered for so long? And it's hard for journalists to do their job and care about the public if they don't feel supported at work. And we need the press to succeed right now. We need journalists to feel supported now more than ever. But it's hard for Americans to believe that the press cares about them if newsrooms don't reflect America. This might sound idealistic, but I'm still the same 15-year-old when I was awestruck when I walked in this building years ago. And all I wanted to do then and all I want to do now is to tell the truth and to hold the powerful to account. And that's why I got in this business. And most importantly, I'm a mother. And like all mothers, I want to raise my son to be a respectful man and a decent human being. And if we can't set the example and stay true to our own principles, perhaps even at the cost of our own success, then how can we expect our children to? Thanks.
Hi, my name is Addie Zanone. I'm a mom, first and foremost. I'm a journalist. I'm a combat veteran. Spent 14 years in the Army. I'm a philanthropist and an activist and a strong warrior. I'm also a co-founder of Press Forward. I grew up in a small little town in West Virginia. And as I got older, I dreamed of sharing the news. I dreamed of being Katie Couric. In fact, I went to college at Temple University in Philadelphia. In my senior year, I used to take the Greyhound. It's all I could afford up to New York, and I'd sit outside Studio 1A, and I'd be like, I want to get in there. I want to get in there. And I got in there through my own tenacity. Wrote a letter to Katie Couric and said, let me in there, let me in there. And she let me in. And I started as an intern. That internship turned into a job. And that job became one of the most amazing, supportive, encouraging things in my life. It made me love the news. Everyone there who worked there were supportive and appreciative of the work I was doing for them. I felt encouraged, I felt empowered. Enough so that I wanted to leave that amazing show to go start my journey onto being a local news journalist, a local news anchor. As I was getting ready to leave, I entered into what could be called a consensual affair with an unnamed, pardon me. I was the most vulnerable, and I believe I was violated by the most powerful and put in a situation where I didn't have the agency to make a good decision. And when you're a young woman and you know that you were an active participant in something that wasn't right, you carry that shame with you forever. And for 17 years I did, on my own. Everyone at that show, producers, production assistants, graphics, editors, executive producers, anchors, treated me with respect. And one person came in and annihilated all of that when I was supposed to be encouraged and uplifted. And my desire to get professional advice from somebody ended up being a violation. And not seeing me as an aspiring journalist, not seeing me as anything more than just a conquest. And how convenient that I was going to be out of the picture not long after. Well, guess what? I'm back. Ding. The point is, I felt such shame. And I was very alone and isolated for so many years. And in November, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. This idea of consent and what consent means when there is a very clear imbalance of power is a conversation we have to have. And it's not pretty. If you want to slide into my DMs or my Twitter, I'll show you how ugly it can get. But when these stories came out, when the accused, who remains anonymous, was brave enough to come out and say, I want you to do the right thing, it empowered me to be able to say, you know what, right, maybe I have to be accountable for my actions. We all do. But this wasn't right. And it affected my entire life. It affected my entire career. He made me feel like an object. And he didn't make me feel like I had any substance. And then when you're done with it, you're dismissive. And you turn on the TV, and there they are. And their contracts are being renewed, and it's constantly just reinforced that their behavior is okay. And in November 2017, I realized it was a pattern behavior that we can at least trace back to November of 2000. And this continued to go on and on. And if I had the courage, if I had the knowledge and the ability to feel like I could go to somebody and tell them about this, maybe that wouldn't have happened. But I can now because there is this space. When I decided to come forward with my face and my story publicly, it's not an easy thing, right? But I wanted to give credibility to these accusations. I saw that these women were being dismissed and not believed because there's no way he could have done that. I don't believe it. Well, believe it. And that's why I came out. We all have suffered. They talked about the ripple effect. It's not easy knowing the world's calling you a whore. It's not easy knowing that your 7-year-old daughter is asking why mommy's on TV or walking in and seeing your son Google you. When 2 months earlier, if he Googled me, he would have learned about my military experience, my combat service, my philanthropic endeavors. Now when he Googles me, he asks, what does this mean, Mommy? And now I have a support system, and we have Press Forward, and we have a movement, and I can tell them, this is Mommy speaking up for all young women. This is Mommy speaking up to make sure that if your sister Hartley, who is 7 years old right now, finds herself in that position, She'll be fortified with the knowledge that she can make better choices. And Hudson, my love, when you're a man in a position of power, you can make better choices as well. And that's why Mommy is out there doing this. And I'm just really grateful that when I did decide to tell my story, that I ended up here in this amazing group of women who were virtual support systems for me when I was sitting alone in a corner in tears in December. So thank you for allowing me an opportunity. And I'm ready to press forward. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Gloria Riviera, and I am here because of all these women, and the incredible inspiration and bravery on display is incredibly invigorating. My personal passion with Press Forward is our young people, our students who are in journalism schools across this country dreaming of entering this business. I've been with ABC for 19 years, and I've seen the way the system works. I've been on assignment from Beijing to Baghdad and back several times, and I've seen the way the system fails. And as far as I can tell, the way that we enter the business has not changed. We enter journalism with our smarts and with our wits about us, and not much else. And we're lucky to be there. And I've been lucky to work at an organization with incredible mentors, male and female. My first boss was Sam Donaldson, who was a bear with a heart of gold. But now when I look at our journalists, I see, shockingly, that many of them have already experienced some degree of sexual misconduct before they even enter newsrooms. And one of the things that struck me when I came forward with my own story was that several of the powerful women that I knew at ABC expressed incredible dismay and sadness that I did not come to them. Woman after woman said to me, "Gloria, you had powerful allies. We would have gone to bat to you." But I did not internalize that, and I didn't carry it with me. And news is so unique because we are often not at headquarters. We're not in the bureau. We're out in God knows where with new teams, new sources, new assignments, almost each and every day. And when I heard those women say those words to me, I was despondent as well. Had I known there was a support system there, had I had trust that it would have made a difference and I would have been heard, maybe things would have been different. My passion today is to bridge that disconnect and to make sure that the young people entering our business know more than I did, whether it's simple tools or it's the knowledge of the respect that you saw the young women in the video talk about. I love the woman who said, "I want to succeed without conditions." And we at Press Forward are committed to making those conditions disappear. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eleanor McManus. I want to tell you a story today, and so you'll understand more why we're doing what we're doing, why this is so important, why Press Forward means something, why we're here today. I had a woman reach out to me recently who's a manager at a top media outlet, which I won't name to protect her and the organization. She was supervising someone who was a freelancer, and she came to her about a story about sexual harassment by a well-respected, longtime employee. There's probably a good chance you've read or seen his work. The freelancer was scared to lose her job and didn't want to do anything to risk her career. She didn't even want to tell her manager. So this female manager convinced the freelancer to go to HR, report it, and the manager went with her to support her claims. HR said that it would investigate the claim. So when the female manager reached out to me, she said the girl was really fearful because she was still working daily with this individual. No one even thought to separate the two of them while there was an ongoing investigation. She didn't think of reporting anything to the EEOC. She figured she was still a freelancer. She didn't want to rattle any feathers because she thought this man was probably much more important to the company than she was. But the manager stood by her, supported her, and then in addition to HR, went to another executive in the company to fight for her employee and tell her what was happening. The manager was incredibly scared as well. She was risking her own career, but she did this for this young woman. Why did she do it? She said she did it for this whole entire movement, and she was just inspired by everything. So the female manager finally contacted me recently, late last week, and came up with an update. And she said that the harasser, the man who was incredibly valuable to the company, he was fired. So the company did the right thing. The manager stood up for the employee. The executive stood up for the manager. The system worked. So 6 months ago, women would have been fearful to report this, and companies would not have taken these types of actions. This demonstrates, I think, a small victory in this long struggle, but it's also proof that there needs to be accountability, education, guidelines, and overall empowerment. This is why we're here today, to help women find their voices and to have newsrooms create these types of environments where women feel safe to report misconduct. There are transparent processes in place, and employees are confident that the companies will stand up for them. This is why we matter, and this is why we press forward.
Hi, Hi, my name is Melinda Ahrens. I was a producer and senior producer for 12 years at ABC News. And I'm here as a friend and ally. Lucky for me, I was never a direct victim of harassment, and in fact had incredible male mentors, including 3 of whom I can count right over there. And always felt very, very lucky to be there. But I became part of an unwitting, what we now call a whisper network, which we didn't even know at the time is what we were doing. I guess we were ahead of our time. And a very, very strong cohort of women who became dear friends over the years, and kept this secret because no one wanted to come forward. None of us felt protected. And even though I've been reminded that I was the thorn in everyone's side, apparently, telling everyone to go to HR, when I think about it, I would not have even known what that looked like. So had I been called on my bluff, I would have had absolutely no idea what to do or how to help my dear friends and colleagues. But 13 years later, we were given a chance to come together again in the most unlikely of ways, for which I'm incredibly grateful. And my passion when it comes to this, even though I've been out of the newsroom for about 5 years, is the world is changing, the industry has changed so drastically. There are all kinds of reasons for the media industry to fail and for outlets to fail at the moment when we need them to succeed the most. And one of them is an inability to keep and retain incredible talent. And with all the choices of technology and different arenas that young people can go into, I think it's difficult to understand why someone would stay in a business for 20, 30, 40 years, even if they're the best and the brightest and they're the most committed, passionate journalists you can imagine, if they work in a toxic culture. They just don't need to do it anymore. And so the industry has absolutely got to keep up with the times because the country needs them now more than ever.
My personal statement is that I think we have some extremely complicated issues, as evidenced by this panel, and we can't solve them all at once. It will take time, but we cannot deny that there is a problem. But I want to end this section by saying, hand on heart, the best years of my career were working at Nightline for 11 years. Ted Koppel and Tom Batag created a fantastic work atmosphere that was respectful and inspiring. Of course, no office is perfect, but it was important to them that every voice is allowed to be heard, from the newest intern to the managing editor. I think that we've had a lot of conversations over these past few months about what hasn't worked well, how the system's failed us, why there's a culture of silence, and why in some places there's a culture of fear. So I think it's important that we look at the offices that have been successful in fostering respect and equality, figure out what recipe they had, and try to emulate that. And so that is it. This is the Women of Press Forward. So we are, hang on, where is it? Okay. Yes. We have, so next up is, in the past 3 months, we have put into motion several actions we'd like to announce now. So we will.
So where do we go from here? During this fascinating season, we've heard from so many people in the journalism industry, but also from other industries sharing their learnings, their best practices, their frameworks for organizational and industry level change, systemic change. We have been solution seekers during this time, taking note of all that, but we also believe that we need time to figure this out. We need to look closely at the literature, at the example set in other workplaces, the best practices that we can emulate in our own field. And we listen to the needs of all stakeholders, from young women and men just starting out in the business to news executives and managers who are looking to build a better work culture. We're working with journalism schools to prepare the future workforce, with men and women who experience sexual harassment, who feel comfortable coming to us to talk about it. And so we've built for ourselves a framework of collaboration with wonderful partners and wonderful people who want to work on the way forward.
And to move towards solutions, Press Forward, which is a nonprofit and nonpartisan initiative, we're actually not a support network, seeks both short-term and long-term ways to address the issues at hand. So in the short term, we know that better awareness and characterization of bad behavior is key. Many of us didn't understand that we had been harassed. We thought that it was a moral and not a legal issue, and so better training is really critical. And most sexual harassment training right now is seen as ineffective, if not broken. So ABC News correspondent Gloria Riviera is going to take a leadership role on this, and as a leader of Press Forward, will partner with the Poynter Institute to innovate sexual harassment training so that those who are most vulnerable know how to identify bad behavior, how newsroom colleagues and managers know how to respond if a colleague comes to them, and leaders are provided clear standards for behavior. And Gloria is also on the board of the Museum's Power Shift Project, which is an initiative that's also providing training and awareness to all stakeholders on this issue. And she will also work with journalism schools across America in partnership with the National Press Club to incorporate these issues into a curriculum. Press Forward, ABC News, and the future workforce is really lucky to have her. Longer term, we seek to do a deeper dive, as Laura was mentioning, and assessing the state of American newsrooms to create a blueprint for culture change, and doing this in an independent and objective manner so that journalists can do their best work. And the Press Forward co-founders, who are CEOs, lawyers, management consultants, current and former journalists, will design this study, engage with those who have been thinking about this for a very long time, and work with newsrooms, and we will rely on our board of advisors and partners to help translate findings from this study into concrete solutions. And then intermittently, we plan to work with newsrooms to conduct culture assessments. We already have been doing this informally, and partner with leading experts to provide management and leadership training. Leadership in this moment could really be described as self-awareness and a willingness to change, and openness to feedback. And so newsroom leaders really need open and honest feedback from their staff to understand how things are from their perspective. To move forward, we also realize that we have a unique opportunity to act as a convener, to foster dialogue across various backgrounds, to create better understanding and trust so that men feel safe, and that women and people from all backgrounds feel like they can succeed in the news business. And to that end, the phenomenal Diana Pierce-Burgess will develop town halls to discuss solutions. Our first panel's today, and the next will be at the museum on April 25th. And we'll also work with the Poynter Institute to publish thought leadership and ensure our voices are heard as we foster change and watch over this moment on behalf of the profession. And lastly, we are proud to announce that we are the official partner of Time's Up for the Press. And as part of that, 10% of all funds raised online will go towards Time's Up Legal Defense Fund. We all know that journalism is a calling, and it's also a tough profession to get into, and it's being digitally disrupted, and many work as freelancers, temps, and interns, and ensuring that the most vulnerable in the profession have access to legal advice and counsel is critical to ensuring that they are protected, because we need them to stay in this business, to make a living and to succeed. Thank you.
In the interest of time, I'm going to go through this quickly. When we launched Press Forward, one of the first things we realized is that we were going to need a lot of help. We needed people who would not only support us, but advise us in our work, and we wanted to surround ourselves with journalists, lawyers, academics, and business leaders, people who understood the importance of our mission and who believed that change is necessary. And we sought a cross-section of wise counselors, many of whom are here today, diverse in backgrounds, race, gender, generation, and sexual orientation. We reached out and they stepped up in droves. And it is my honor to tell you who our board of advisors are. It will continue to grow, but we wanted to acknowledge them, those who have signed on so far, and we thank them for believing in what we're doing, supporting us, lending their time, leadership, and wisdom to Press Forward. And again, in the interest of time, I won't read titles, but I think you'll recognize a lot of these names anyway. Lynn Adrien, Allison Camerota, Gretchen Carlson, John Donvan, Dee Dee Helfenstein, Sara Just, Mary Louise Kelly, Ted Koppel, Elisa Munoz, Kate O'Brien, Karen Pensiero, Allison Stewart, Jonathan Swan, Jake Tapper, Ari Wilkenfeld, and of course Judy Woodruff as well. So for those of you who are here on that list, could you please stand, because we want to. So, thank you. And the last thing I want to do, we want to recognize the organizations who have agreed to partner with us. Like our advisors, these institutions have stepped forward in a dramatic way to support our work and initiatives. They include, as Carolyn just said, Time's Up, the Newsroom, the Poynter Institute, the International Women's Media Foundation, Modern Alliance, the Purple Campaign, News Deeply, the Greater Washington Community Foundation, and Zukin Leadership. We value their support, and we're delighted to have the opportunity to collaborate with them. So, thank you.
So we are now moving into our panel discussion, which is called Rules of Engagement, Creating Safe and Fair Newsrooms. I don't think our moderator needs any introduction, but I will do a brief introduction for her. Broadcast journalist Judy Woodruff is the anchor and managing editor of PBS NewsHour. She has covered politics and other news for more than 4 decades at CNN, NBC, and PBS. Judy is also the co-founding chair of International Women's Media Foundation, which is an organization dedicated to promoting and encouraging women in communications industries worldwide, which is also one of our partners. And she is also we are proud to say that she has joined our advisory board. Judy Woodruff.
Thank you, Diana. I am so pleased to be here, to be a part of the program as you launch Press Forward. I know we're trying to get the chairs organized for the next panel, so I'm just going to speak for a moment while we do this. I have to say I was shaken when these stories first emerged publicly in the late fall. I've continued to be shaken by them, and I was shaken again just now as I listened to these women tell their own stories, and very painfully, in every instance, tell their own stories. These are things that should not be happening. They cannot be tolerated. They cannot be accepted in the work that we do, and that's why I'm here. I want to make sure that the young women coming along, the women who work in our industry now, and young women who are thinking about journalism today, not a single one of them is held back because of this kind of activity, this kind of climate, this kind of culture. It just should not exist, and that's why I'm here. I grew up in journalism. I became a reporter in 1970. I certainly knew of harassment that existed. I experienced my own versions of it, but it's clear, I never was aware that existed to the extent that we now know that it has and that it does. So that's another reason that I'm here. I think I was particularly struck by what Shannon said. We're supposed to be the voice for the voiceless. And the tables were turned, and that's what makes this so difficult to deal with. The only other thing I want to say before I introduce the panel is that, you know, we are all in the business of journalism and the media guilty of short attention spans. It's what we do. We have to move from one story to the next, practically not only by the week, by the day, and now by the hour, by the minute. But my fervent hope is that this is an issue that we are not going to forget about. We are not going to move on. Yes, we will cover other things. Yes, we'll talk about other things. But we have to continue to talk about what's happened. Otherwise, we'll never make change. So with that, I'm just so pleased to have this terrific panel. You recognize all of them, I know, but so I'm going to keep introductions short, and we're going to get to hear from them. To my right, to your left, Ted Koppel. For more than 4 decades, the award-winning anchor correspondent for ABC News, covering practically every major news event. I was reminded, Ted, from the funeral of John Kennedy in 1963 to Hurricane Katrina in 2005. For 25 years, he anchored the show that became emblematic of ABC News, Nightline. And since leaving ABC, he has stayed active. He's written a book. He's been reporting. And he continues to work teaching today. Ted Koppel, welcome. To Ted's right is Sara Just, who is my executive producer at the PBS NewsHour, I'm very happy to say. She joined the NewsHour in September of 2014, and for the last 3.5 years, she's directed the program editorially in its production, both online and on air. Before that, she had spent 25 years at ABC News, 17 years at Nightline, and later as the Deputy Washington Bureau Chief. Sara Just. And to Sarah's right, over there, Jake Tapper. We all know him well, CNN anchor, chief Washington correspondent. He anchors, as we know, The Daily Show on CNN, The Lead with Jake Tapper, as well as moderating their Sunday talk show, State of the Union. Before joining CNN in 2012, Jake was a correspondent with ABC News for, was it 9 years, something like that, as well as he had a distinguished career as a print journalist. Prior to that, he wrote for the New York Times, for Salon, for the Washington Post, and for many others. Jake Tapper. You've already met Laura Satrakian. She's a leader of this movement, Press Forward, so I'm not going to reintroduce her. But Laura, we are very glad to have you, and Carolyn McGurty-Supple, who is going to be part of this conversation as well. Thanks to both of you and for your leadership. But the last person I want to introduce is Ari Wilkenfeld. He's a lawyer here in Washington with Wilkenfeld, Herendeen, and Atkinson. His expertise is employment. This is important. He's worked as both a management side labor lawyer and for the last 18 years as a plaintiff's side employment attorney. He has extensive experience litigating in federal courts and in state courts before the EEOC and other boards and other fora. He's represented thousands of individuals in cases against their former or current employers. Most recently, he represented a woman who brought sexual misconduct claims against Matt Lauer. So let's welcome Ari Wilkenfeld. The first thing I want to ask all of you is, I was so struck, and Laura and Carolyn, you were part of the conversation, but I want to ask the other panelists, frankly, to just react to what you've heard. We've been hearing these stories, we know it's happening, but how do you process this, and how could it have happened for so long in this industry that we love so much? And Ted, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I must say I was very touched by the combination of passion and moderation. I was a little bit nervous before I came here because I thought it would be much heavier on the side of passion and not as much attention given to moderation. Having said that, I'm still bewildered by the fact that so many of these young women didn't feel that there was any senior management person that they could go to with whom they could share their stories. That so many of them felt the need to internalize it, were fearful that if indeed they spoke up, they would jeopardize not the person they were accusing of bad behavior, but rather themselves. And one can only hope that with the extraordinary attention that's been given to this subject over the past few months, that will no longer be the case. But again, I'd like to hear more about why it is that so many of them, essentially all of them, felt that they could not come to a senior management person and express their outrage.
Well, I'm going to come back right now to Laura and Carolyn. Does either one of you want to address that?
It's clearly sensitive for the reasons of those who may have known. And it's not our purpose here to go back into that, per se. We are very much oriented towards solution seeking and structural change. I do think that we all felt, to some extent, folks in senior management, either if they were aware, were not sensitive to it, or in various cases, maybe there was an awareness that wasn't acted upon. So in every case, it's been different. Every case we've heard so far of women who've come to us, not just within our group, but beyond it, there was a discomfort, of course, of going forward to management, but also, at times, a sense that nothing would happen, at times, a fact that nothing did happen. So we've heard a wide spectrum of reasons why. And again, this is not our primary focus, but the toxicity that was described, that one bad apple can create a toxic fear for an entire workplace, is a very thick blanket of impact.
But I'm still confused by the inability to come to anyone. It doesn't have to be management. It could simply have been an older woman, an older man on the staff.
Yeah, in many cases, we did go to colleagues, and in the end, past 5-6 months, those colleagues were the ones to come forward with the recollection of being told. So there was, in the end, a circle of trust and conversation, but it always stayed within that circle generally. And it didn't cross over to another department where other women could have been warned. It was very, very localized. Carrie, I don't know if you...
I was going to say that I think we failed each other. That's the honest answer. I spent some time speaking with former newsroom leaders who I worked with who also just were completely surprised that none of us felt safe coming to them. And they were hurt by it. And I just don't think that they failed us per se. Many of us didn't understand what had happened to us because sexual harassment isn't really something that many people knew how to characterize until this moment. And there were many women who grew up in that environment for decades who had also been subjected to behavior and just dealt with it. But that being said, I think that culture is set by leadership. And if you have a leader who's supposed to be covering politicians and the powerful and is exposing this type of behavior and holding world leaders to account and is committing it themselves behind the scenes, what does that say about the culture of television? And for me, it meant that there were people who abused their power. And that struck a lot of fear. So I just think that it's important that we characterize it as not just sexual harassment, but as an abuse of power.
As we, and we are going to talk about the future, but I do think it's important to talk about what we heard this morning. Sara, how do you process it and how do you explain it?
It's difficult. You know, I was one of those managers who, in somewhat more junior position, but still in management of a level that wasn't aware of this, didn't see this, and really, you know, will question that forever, and believe that I would have stood up for my friends and colleagues if they'd come to me. But, you know, the culture was definitely challenging. I can certainly see why they were afraid to, or discouraged to. One of the things that I was struck by listening to the women this morning who were so impressive is we need the best and the brightest in journalism. And a lot of these women walked away. And that That is, and we don't even know how many more have done the same, who are in the industry and for whatever, and would seem to be on the ascent and for whatever reason walked away. We all know people who fit that description. And perhaps they were victimized. And it just makes no sense. It's not just morally repugnant, but it makes no business sense to have our talented journalists not staying in the industry because they're feeling threatened. That has to change.
Jake, what do you think?
I had the same reaction that Sara just vocalized, which is it just breaks my heart. I worked at ABC with 5 of the women on stage before us, and the idea that any one of them walked away from journalism or thought about walking away from journalism because of the toxic culture makes me so sad. I work at CNN now, and the notion, I mean, there's so many brilliant women with whom I work, and the notion that any of them, just extrapolating this towards the present, would walk away would be such a loss for journalism, for American discourse. And then, of course, you get into the whole idea of just basic human decency. We talk a lot about indecent behavior that we see from politicians today, and the idea that this was thriving at every network and newspaper for the last 20 years. I have to say, just as somebody who was, although I'm old now, a junior at the time that a lot of this stuff was happening, I did hear from individuals in the last few months about their experiences in newsrooms and telling a powerful correspondent or telling somebody in management about situations and being told, don't rock the boat, or even being reprimanded for bringing it up. These are not my stories to tell. These are the stories of women. If they want to come forward, they can. But there were people who did try to do something, not in every instance, I suppose. I don't know every instance, but who did try to reach out to somebody, and they were met with a shrug or even chastisement. And I think one of the reasons is when you look at the names of the people who have been fingered in the last year during the Me Too movement when it comes to journalism, a lot of them were incredibly powerful, if not the most powerful person at individual networks. And, you know, the almighty dollar has a way of ruling.
Ari Wilkenfeld, clearly not all women who've experienced this go to hire an attorney, take legal steps. Some do, but you've had lots of experience across different professions, different kinds of work. Why do you think we feel like this is happening much more than it should in the profession of journalism, where we like to think we wouldn't be doing something like this? As somebody on the outside looking in, why do you think it's been as prevalent as it has been?
Well, I think that amongst the first panel, which I can't believe we have to follow, but amongst the first panel, there was a lot of discussion about fear of what would happen to you professionally, what would happen to you socially in the newsroom if you came forward. That's a legitimate concern. In sexual harassment cases, there's often 2 cases in one. There's the harassment element of it, and there's the retaliation element of it. Once the woman complains, something happens to her, usually getting fired. And the overwhelming majority of cases that I've worked on have involved both. And so the notion that these brave women and the other brave women who've come forward and the women who are making their way to coming forward, the idea that they're concerned about what will be done to them in retaliation for coming forward is a very real concern, and it's something they should be concerned about. We're going to work on that, hopefully all of us going forward, to make sure that we foster working environments where women feel safe, secure, and supported coming forward. But we're not there now. The one other thing that I realized for the first time last night as I met some of these founders is that I've been doing this work for a long time, hundreds of sexual harassment victims. I've never represented a journalist. And I think there might be something unique to your profession which creates a culture of silence around this stuff, and hopefully we can break through that.
How do we break through that? I mean, does anybody have any thoughts about why it's so hard? I mean, there's pressure, yes, there's ratings and commercial. We've been talking mainly about broadcast here, but clearly this has happened in print as well. We just don't hear as much about it. But, you know, does anybody have a theory about why there is this culture of silence, of protection? What's the pressure? What's creating it?
I think one issue is that a lot of people don't regard the HR departments at their news organizations as there to protect workers, but rather there to protect the company. I think that's a big problem. And frankly, I don't know that every news organization, I don't know if every reporter even knows who their HR representatives are. I don't think it's taken as seriously in news organizations as perhaps it should be.
Laura, Carol, go ahead, Ari.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that, and again, I hate to be like the bad news guy, but I think in most cases, people's lack of regard for the HR department is well-founded. The people who work in the HR department work for the company just like everybody else, and they don't want to be the ones bringing, coming up with a very junior female saying the top guy at the company might need to go. That's not a pleasant message to have to bring. And so HR is often not on the employee side. Some companies do it great, some companies do it terribly, and it's very hard to know which one you're at.
But why would management, I'm just trying to be a little provocative, why would management want to foster a culture where employees are afraid to speak up, where they feel they could lose their job for being honest? I mean, why would management want a culture like that?
As manager, I can say we don't. We want people to speak up. But what really I think is going to be imperative for this shift to happen is for management to be, and I think we're starting to see it, but to be strong enough to say we won't tolerate this behavior even from the person around whom perhaps it seems this entire business is built. And if management can say, no, we don't tolerate that, and consequences are in place, then I think it just permeates the entire culture. But when there is a sense that the business imperative comes first, that is what creates this problem.
Ted, what about that? I mean, that dynamic between management and the push and pull of what's important.
I mean, Judy, you and I have seen an evolution over the past few decades in this business. I remember when a woman by the name of Pauline Frederick, that name is probably unknown to almost everybody in this room. She was the only woman correspondent at any one of the three networks. She was the UN correspondent for many, many years. So we have that initial evolution from what was an all-male business to an all-male business that finally permitted some women to come in at certain levels. And then you have on top of that another layering of the sort of front page mentality of what it meant to be in the journalism business. You had to be tough, you had to be prepared to listen to rough language. You were working in an environment in which you had these extraordinary deadline pressures that existed. I remember one of the names that the women at Nightline used to call themselves, remember? The Nightline Nuns. They were the Nightline Nuns because we went on the air at 11:30 at night, and we usually started working about 9:30, 10 in the morning. And I am aware of a number of social relationships that began at Nightline that ended up in marriages between staffers. So the whole notion of not only your professional life, but much of your social life was encompassed within that one program. I'm just saying we are in a process of evolution that continues to this day. And when I said before that I was impressed not just by the passion, but by the moderation of what all these brave women had to say, it's too easy now to just express outrage. The whole point is we weren't feeling outrage. And we weren't, well, I say we as man and manager at Nightline, I wasn't aware of outrage. Should have been, perhaps. You're nodding your head. It should have been. I hope that if there were any cases of people feeling, of women feeling at Nightline, or men for that matter, that they had been violated in any way that they would have spoken up. But to the best of my knowledge, with one exception, they did not.
Judy, can I just say something? The House Ethics Committee process is more serious and more transparent than what we've seen from any of these media organizations, and that's not meant as a compliment. I will respect the brave women on the stage before us who didn't mention any names, but go back and look at how some of these organizations have handled accusations of fired or past employees. See the legalistic statements that they issued. Look at how many other people who may have known were held responsible. The answer, I believe, is 0. It's not as if the purge that we saw of some abhorrent behavior and men who displayed abhorrent behavior, it's not as though the cancer is out of the body. It's not.
As we've heard from, as we've heard now from reporters who cover this story in our industry, now the less famous cases don't get covered. So we don't know what's quietly happening or what's changing that affects so many women who haven't had the chance to come up here and share their stories.
And actually,
all right.
And this is something I want to kind of put out to all the journalists, which I assume is most of you in this room today. I worry about the movement. I worry that we're all getting great ratings from these high-profile men being brought down, but I worry that the country and/or the media and/or journalism doesn't have the attention span to follow this issue as we move from what the public regards as more entertaining takedown jobs of rich and powerful men to, the woman who works at a restaurant, the woman who is an undocumented worker who works on a farm, who is undergoing things you wouldn't believe. Are we gonna continue to follow this movement as it becomes more mundane and we start to realize the full scope of it? And I hope that we can.
Well, as I said at the outset, to me, that is an absolute priority. That is the most important thing coming out of this, that we don't lose the focus, that we stay focused on this. And that's why I think Press Forward, it's so important what you're doing. Carolyn, what would you all, or Carrie, what would you all have needed? Who did you need in the newsroom, in your immediate surroundings to turn to when you were there?
If I could offer an observation too, as someone who stepped outside the industry and is able to compare how news organizations function versus other companies, I think this moment's really a business and a leadership issue. It comes at a high cost to not get this right. If I were a shareholder, I'd be quite upset for not having more transparency for the path forward. Journalism is a knowledge workforce, and that means that you invest in your people. It also means that you come up with great career paths, that it's very transparent for how one rises to the next level, how competencies are set up for talent. Not having that transparency, I think, creates a lot of fear for young people who are starting out the profession, who are the most vulnerable. So journalists are great at living up to the mission, telling great stories, but in terms of running as world-class organizations, there needs to be some more investment in HR, in operations, on the business side of things, to make sure that when journalists go into the profession, that they work in a world-class organization.
Can that be changed? I mean, we're different from other professions. We don't operate the way banks and law firms and others do. Can we change it so there is more transparency? Is that doable? What do we think? I mean,
I think you can, and I think the wave of harassers being brought down by this is a function, first of all, of a lot of brave women coming forward all at once, but also it's a consequence of we're making it too expensive to not do anything about it. Monetarily, we're making it too expensive. We've seen that cases that are hushed up generate staggering amounts of money in payouts, and I think that has to be part of the equation for these businesses, is that if you don't deal with it, we're going to make it expensive for you.
It's not a heart transplant, it's new norms and practices. So the very same people can run a much better ship if they adopt better practices. We're not going to change human nature overnight, but what is acceptable and how it's dealt with is due for a change.
is there any, I want to come back to something, one of the young women on the earlier panel talked about a consensual relationship. Is there any doubt in our minds today what the difference is between a relationship that's truly consensual and one where one person's taking advantage? I mean, are we clear on what we're talking about here? What do we think?
No.
Ari? Yeah.
No, we got to work on that. And, you know, I think that issues that young women, mostly, maybe a few young men, but mostly young women confront when they're entering the organization and they come into contact with, you know, powerful, famous, handsome men at the top of the organization. You know, they need to be, you know, it's difficult. We can't say we need to protect them. That's paternalistic, and it deprives them of their free will. But we need to kind of help them understand a little bit better what this will mean down the road for them. And also, we need to let the handsome guy at the top of the organization know, you do this at your own peril.
The men need to take responsibility too.
Right, and they need to question themselves they need to question themselves, is this consensual? Like, is this person, does she really want to be with me, or is she wrapped up in a power dynamic that I'm on the good side of? And I say, again, at your own peril.
Tad and Jake, have there been conversations among men since all this happened? I mean, among your men friends about how this happened and why it happened? I mean,
oh, sure, of course. There is a climate of fear that is spreading through the entire industry, I'm sure. But let me acknowledge the obvious here. I'm here because there was a need for old fogeyism to be represented on this panel. So let me say some things that I concede at the outset are generational. We need, if they ever existed, we need a restoration of good manners. We need a restoration of good taste. It means, among other things, that there is not, I don't want to suggest that there is a responsibility which permits this kind of behavior, but I do think people need to dress for work. That, I am sure, is an unpopular notion today. But the fact of the matter is, I would feel just as upset by a guy coming in wearing a t-shirt and torn jeans to come to work at the office, as I am by a woman who comes in wearing a skirt that is so short that it is provocative. Does that permit or encourage or excuse the kind of behavior we're talking about here? No, it does not. However, if we're going to change the atmosphere in the workplace, I think we have to acknowledge that there is, that simply reinstating good manners is not a bad place to start.
I'll just say we love guys. Guys are awesome. Men should not feel unsafe right now. You have to understand is that there is a small number of men who abuse their power. And what's, I think, really critical at this moment is that men and women have a chance to talk to each other, that men feel safe, that they're not going to land in HR because they, said something inappropriate. I mean, there are clear black and white, and some gray, but it's really important to understand that there are a lot of good men out there. And I work in technology and consulting now. I'm usually the only woman in the room, and I've never had any problems. So it's really just critical to level set and say, I really hope that this doesn't become a women's issue. I hope this becomes a human decency issue, and we can continue to have the conversation where what Ted just said might seem provocative, but men need to be able to talk about their perspective uncomfortably so that we can move forward.
That's why I think it is so important that we talk about all this out in the open. We're going to open it up for questions from the audience, but I do want to, as we move ahead, I'd like to maybe pick up on something Ted said about do we need, to talk among ourselves about a code of conduct among journalists. I mean, have we let that slip? Is that even possible in the crazy, unpredictable environment that so many of us work in? Anybody else before we go to questions? Sara.
We just have to be on guard that this moment not shift into a situation where women are disinvited to certain assignments, meetings, opportunities, because men are worried that there might be a perception problem, or there might be any kind of accusation. And so that, for women to feel truly empowered in the workplace, they have to feel, we work in journalism, we work long hours, we travel, we, work in close quarters. That's just a part of the job. But women have achieved wonderful equality in many ways in this industry, as Ted was outlining. But it would be, I think, just a shame if this moment swung the pendulum the other direction because of fear.
If I may say, I completely agree. And some of us, including myself, are new to this aspect of the conversation. But IWMF, one of our partners, has been researching this for years. We've got the grist for the mill to have an intelligent brainstorm. We are designed thinkers in this team of Press Forward. We fully intend to think through this systemically. And there is hope for coming up with good ways to have these conversations.
And if I could just
Yes,
very
all right.
quickly, I think it's important that we have these conversations not segregated, men talking amongst themselves about what's right and wrong and women talking amongst. I think we're going to have some really difficult, uncomfortable, unpleasant conversations between men and women to sort of establish where the line is. We're never going to know exactly where the line is, but we're going to have to work through this together. And what Ted calls good manners, which I agree with. I'd say the very simple rule: men shouldn't be afraid. It's very easy. If you're thinking about whether or not you should say something to a woman, don't. And it's a pretty easy test, which works 98 times out of 100. But yeah, I think we're going to have some really hard conversations between genders.
That's something we're going to remember. Okay, we're going to take questions from the audience. I think Barbara. Oh. Sure. I think we have a microphone we can bring you. We have a plan here. Okay.
My name is Lynn Adrian. I'm on the advisory board for Press Forward. I'm the director of the DC graduate program in broadcast and digital journalism for the Newhouse School at Syracuse University. And I was at ABC News for 16 years. And I wanted to leap up at this point because I wanted to just take a little walk in the truth here. I can remember in the hallway at ABC watching an executive producer berate a senior producer in the most profane, loud way possible in the hallway in front of the elevator. If I am a more junior person and I see that he can get away with that, and nothing was said, do you think I'm really going to go to HR and say, oh, I've been harassed, I've been bothered, or even one person who was there when I was there who got hit in the head a couple of times with a rolled up newspaper because she had spoken, he felt incorrectly to one of the producers? No, I would not go to HR to take care of me. And that is part of the reason why there has been this undercurrent and there has been the reluctance to go forward. That was at ABC while I was there. And I became a senior producer. But I don't know if I would have gone to HR. I didn't feel that HR was looking out for me. That is why we are going to have to come up with different ways of empowering the workforce instead of, and not just relying on what happens from the employers in the first place. And I will say that those stakes are much higher for people of color and people, and for people who could possibly be seen as problematic in the first place and think that if I say something, this will be my way out the door.
I think there's no question that the news business rewards sometimes the rudest, the loudest, and sometimes the most inappropriate. We don't like to acknowledge that, but sometimes that's been the case. We've all seen it. Okay, Barbara and Andrea, I think we're going to take the microphone.
Right. You had a card that you could fill out with questions. We've got enough here to fill the remaining half hour, but if you have a burning question, please send it up because some of these may be duplicates. The first question is, what are your plans to engage and support women of color who typically are even more vulnerable to abuse of power and more likely to have their stories dismissed and disbelieved?
Seems like a question for Press Forward. So it is top of mind. Race for us is top of mind. And the experience of our friends who experience our industry differently is for us integral to this. My mind doesn't ever jump to intersectionality because I don't think they're different problems. I think it's the same problem. It's whether you commoditize people and whether you treat them like worthy individuals or not. Whether a certain beauty standard is so crucial to your upward mobility that certain friends of mine feel ruled out from the start, and it's painful for them. It leaves a scar. I've seen how it affects them for many years to come. I remember Jake was so encouraging. You were one of those great guys who inspired me and encouraged me along the way. And I thought about when you sent a super encouraging note a few months ago, I was like, all those times, my self-esteem was already shot. Because the fact is, when you are commoditized, whether you feel lesser than because you don't know if you're going to meet that standard, or there's no way you're going to meet that standard because you're not born into that standard, or you worry that how much longer am I going to be able to uphold this standard? How fast do I need to make gains in this industry to be able to have a seat at the table? It really wreaks havoc on a huge I think of CPU and I think of computer power. A lot of a woman's computer power is being tied up with this stuff. And if you're a woman of color, I've seen friends of mine who feel like they were never even dealt in to begin with. So they are top of mind for us, and we are going to figure out how that gets designed in.
When you go to work, you should be able to do your job and fulfill your potential no matter what you look like or where you came from. It's what it means to be an American. We all believe in that dream. And that's what I think our values are within Press Forward, but I think that's also what the values need to be for any news organization. And leaders at this moment are self-reflective, and so even if they have the best of intentions and maybe don't feel like they are excluding folks, it's clear that some feel that way, and they need to listen to the feedback. And that's what leaders do. They listen to feedback, and if they're not getting it, then they need to go out and get it. And you're hearing it in this room today.
Anybody else on race, standards? Okay, Andrea.
In the deep dive research that Press Forward plans to conduct regarding input on the industry, will you be looking into how harassment has impacted press freedoms? Do you have a sense of how many stories have been silenced?
We will now. We're working on the study design, and we're working with faculty advisors. We're really serious about this. The study was for us both a way to extend the shot clock for having an answer. We're not going to know how to deal with this the minute it breaks, but also so we can be comprehensive. We'll do a literature review. We will look at the existing research. We will consult with experts who do organizational change, and from that get a lot of raw data that will help us understand the impact on this in newsrooms. We know it's pushed people out, and people are the carriers of those stories. And when you look at the attrition rates of women who've left the industry and people of color who've left the industry, I think it's a pretty easy line to draw around what stories aren't then told or how we're not sensitized. When was the last time we saw a story about Native Americans? I can't attribute that to anything. There's no causal link I can draw. I don't know if our faculty could regress that somehow based on representation, but I think it needs to be said and it needs to be corrected for.
The head of NASA once said, let's work the problem, people. Let's not make it work worse by guessing. And right now what we need is problem definition, and you can't do that without great data. So what you're talking about, we need to assess the industry independently and objectively. There's a lot of open source data that we can pull from, but I also think that as we look at the study design, we're gonna have to seek out those stories and create safety for folks who work in news organizations to talk about the realities on the ground, and also look at great success stories of what great newsroom leadership and management looks like.
I mean, we just saw from the panel this morning what talent journalism lost. Those individuals went on to give their talent and make contributions in other fields, but we've already seen the tangible loss.
I have a trio of questions here regarding the role of men. The first one is, are you concerned that men being accused may not be getting the chance to respond before their careers are ended? And then sort of the yang to that yin, why are we so concerned about men's feelings? And then finally, what can men do to help make changes from within?
I'm happy to take the first one, which was, do we bear responsibility and what should happen to these men? What's the framework for accountability? And you know, the reality is that we just told our stories. It's up to the industry and their peers to figure out what happens next. I think all of us would like to see more introspection and personal responsibility.
We've got 3 guys up here.
What can men do? What can men do?
I mean, I think that every man obviously needs to be sensitive to these issues and aware of them, and realize that, you know, this isn't 1948 anymore, and nor is it even 2017 anymore. There has been a cultural shift and an awareness. Obviously, every process needs to have due process, and an accusation is not a fact. Things need to be investigated. We know that it's, according to the most progressive organizations, somewhere between 2 and 8% of accusations of sexual assault are not proven, and that's a vast minority, but it's not nothing. And so, you know, everything needs to be investigated, and I don't hear anybody suggesting otherwise.
I do want to suggest, I mean, these kinds of gatherings are absolutely needed at this stage. But as this process goes along, you need to open yourselves up to other points of view. And when I say other points of view, I'm not suggesting that there is a point of view that is sympathetic to sexual harassment. I'm simply saying right now we're just getting a lot of echoes of what everybody else is saying. That's great for the opening stage, but you need to invite people in who do not necessarily agree with everything that you're saying here. Journalism, journalism in general is not banking, it's not the insurance business. It is an industry in which for much of my life, women have been struggling to be accepted as equal partners. And I think equality is a very important point to stress here. Because equality doesn't mean that we're constantly going to be walking around worrying about offending you because the language is inappropriate. Language in a newsroom tends to be inappropriate. And frankly, I don't think any one of you here is here because you heard some bad words in a newsroom. It went way beyond that. My concern is that it doesn't go to the point as this moves out into the world and as your movement becomes, and I hope it does become an enormously successful one, don't become extremists.
Anybody want to react, comment? And Ari, you want to say something?
Yeah. Well, first let me say, I think there's a lot men can do. And the first thing is to, look in the mirror and kind of examine our own behavior and see if there might have been things we've done which maybe we shouldn't have. I think it's important for men in general to look at their career and ask themselves, would I be in the job I have today if I'd done everything the same as a woman? I know my answer, it's no. It's an emphatic no. And when you recognize that, the position you've obtained is in part due to sexism, you have to look at all the tools that are deployed to get us men to where we are. And one of them is sexual harassment. And as we try and come up with, I don't think anybody wants to have a revolution and make complete sea changes to what the workplace looks like, but women do constitute over half the population, and they should have at least half the say in what our workplaces are going to sound and look like.
This issue is deeply connected to gender equity in leadership roles in news organizations. How can these two issues be connected?
Sara?
We need great leaders. More women in leadership, but I also think we need great leaders, and we need to understand the behaviors and competencies of effective leaders. And I think we're seeing now that great leaders create safety. They make people feel comfortable coming to you with your ideas. Great leaders enable the success out of others. They don't serve themselves. So we absolutely do need great leaders and more women leaders. But I think all of us can agree that if we really believe that that everybody's equal, that some women who become in leadership positions can also be equally bad, because power is power. So I think it's very important in this moment that we talk about what great leadership looks like.
Sara, do you?
No, I just want to say I totally agree with that. I think somebody was mentioning earlier the behavior that has to stop, of course, is this harassment and abuse, but also just bullying in general, and that is a gender-neutral problem. It needs to be stopped. Leadership needs to stop bullying, whether or not sexual harassment is involved, because it does just cast a chill on the entire newsroom. And so whether it's women or men in leadership, we have to stop that.
I like to say this is not about sex, it's about power.
Right.
And that's what you just said. Two questions regarding the next generation. What can college students do to change the culture before going into the workplace? I guess I would say in the early days in the workplace. And we've talked a lot about the industry, but what should be going on in journalism schools?
We're very, very excited to be working with not just a few journalism schools, but also the Association of Journalism Schools to discuss what we can do about that. But also we're very emphatic and moving quickly to organize what we think is a very necessary intern welcome conference for this summer, so that those coming in to different newsrooms and different environments have a network, but also have that content and that substantive heads up on what to do in these situations, and a certain camaraderie transversal around all the organizations they work for. We have heard again and again and again that when it comes to these guys, they'd always go for the interns. And we want to make sure that students know what acceptable and unacceptable behavior looks like.
And what about inside newsrooms? I mean, what can be done in the short term, do we think, to change the environment? Training, open conversation, what else?
There have to be clear standards that are in terms of behavior, but also in terms of what to do if you hear about something like this. Very often, as a manager, these kinds of reports don't come to you in a really direct way. You know, occasionally, someone will come to you and say, "This happened to me," and that obviously is the easiest one to act on. But you may hear a third hand, you may hear a rumor, you may hear a joke that landed flat, and you wonder, is there something there that we need to be aware of? And as managers, I think we don't just we have to have more than just an open door policy to this, but we have to really treat it as a priority. And I think that I'm excited about Press Forward's best practices that they're going to be coming forward with. I think industry-wide, that'll be really helpful.
I think also, again, we've said this before, but we have to foster an environment where it's safe to come forward. You know, I've heard a little bit about what Addie's inbox looks like. It's terrifying. My anonymous client is lucky I get her hate mail because no one knows who she is, and it's terrifying. I think, and this is a place where I think both men and women, but particularly men, can make a difference. We need to make sure that those who do have the courage to come forward and complain aren't ostracized, aren't shamed, and aren't treated like, you know, people with mental defects or, you know, or promiscuous or anything like that. We have to allow them to come forward safely and without shame.
Or that they're weak.
Right.
Which I think sometimes is a broad impression. It's not the case.
I would say that Press Forward is really not going to be the change newsrooms are. And so we can share best practices and guidelines, but really newsrooms have to be the change. And it's going to be a day-to-day process, and it's going to take time. And you know, somebody who stepped outside of the industry, 70% of new initiatives usually fail. And that's really due to a failure in leadership. Leaders set the course.
Did you say news initiatives or new initiatives?
New initiatives.
Okay.
So if a company introduces an initiative for change, like whether it's a new sexual harassment training policy or new policy or guidelines, 70% of them usually fail. And it usually fails because leaders don't communicate effectively. So leaders really need at this moment to communicate to their companies and to their staff about what's appropriate and not appropriate, even if it seems obvious, and to let them know what their values are, and make sure that they celebrate what those values are, so that when people go into work, they know what things stand for, because values really only matter in moments of crisis, which is when we turn to journalists every day. So we need to make sure that in moments of crisis that people actually live by their values.
We have Jonathan Swan.
I'd be curious to know your views on the panel. Do you think we're at a point where sorry,
it's okay.
Could you write your question down?
On cards, but it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. We can
got a deep booming voice. Very booming voice. Do you think we're at a point where we need just blanket rules where if you're running a news organisation, you don't make any advances, romantic advances at your co-workers, particularly if you are a male who's more powerful, or even the reverse, if you're a woman who's more powerful and you have capacity to fire that person, and that you position it almost as an extreme circumstance. If love overtakes both of you and the galaxies align, then you at least go to HR together. And I know a friend of mine actually who is very senior at one organisation did fall in love with someone there, and they actually went to HR together and told them about their relationship, and so that was the way that got off. But I'd just be curious to know your views, because I think personally I've come to a view that you just don't do it. Just don't make moves on your co-workers. There are other people around. You can find others. It's not that hard. It's just not that hard. Anyway, that's
Ari, or there are organizations that have, that have rules in place about that, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point, Addie. In the military, you can get court-martialed for this. But I happen to think that bright line rules of like no dating, no marrying, no anything like that. If you're setting yourself up for disaster, because humans are humans, and they're going to feel what they feel. You know, in the late 90s, the defense bar experimented with what were called love contracts, where if two people were dating in the workplace, they would go to HR and they'd both sign a contract and say it was consensual, and it led to unbelievably terrible but hilarious results, and it was quickly stopped. I don't know that we have the answer, but I don't think a bright line rule is the answer.
It's Andrea's turn.
What is owed to those whose careers have suffered or were destroyed because they spoke up or weren't willing to go along?
That's a very good question. I mean, have we even given that very much thought? Many of them have gone on to other careers, but some of them continue, as we heard earlier, to suffer a lot. I think that's a conversation we need to have. Maybe it's something Press Forward is including in your mission.
I personally think that I'm very oriented toward giving anyone who wants a job in our industry a fair shot. I know the jobs aren't exactly plentiful, and there's a sense of scarcity, if not a fact of scarcity. But I also know that women who have not had a chance to live their dream and to prove themselves on their merits, I think that both for self-centered reasons of talent acquisition and basic humanity, they should be given a fair shot to get back into our industry. That's just how I feel. I don't know if it's going to be in the study, but...
Yeah.
Okay. This question is for Ari. Can you speak to the issue that some say this is a generational issue?
Yeah, I've heard that a lot, and you know, sexual harassment has been around as long as women have been in the workplace, and it's never been right. It's been tolerated, and we should be ashamed of that. There are lots of things in our history that we have tolerated that we're ashamed about, and this should just be another one of them. I don't think that men were any worse before. I don't think that women were any more willing to receive this treatment before. I just think that we've reached a moment in history where we've hit a critical breaking point where a lot of women are saying, no, it's just enough. We just elected a guy who openly bragged about sexually harassing people, and he got elected. And there were no repercussions whatsoever. And you saw that everything happened right after that. And I don't think that's a coincidence. So I don't think men today are any better than men before. I just think that we have a better understanding of what the rules are and what the consequences are.
Anybody else on this generational question?
I'd like to say one thing. Don't underestimate the value of a single determined person. I realize you are at the beginning of a movement, and movements are important. But somewhere in this room is an old friend, someone who used to work at Nightline many years ago. Debbie left, and I first became aware of Debbie in her role as a law student at the University of Chicago. And she will, I'm sure, correct me if I get the details of this wrong, but Debbie was outraged by the fact that there was, at that time, I think, only one woman law school professor. And she, as a law student, sued the law school at the University of Chicago, and she won. Now, I don't expect that to be repeated. I tell you that story only because you cannot undervalue the importance of one determined individual. And what you have now is the beginnings of a sense of comradeship, a sense of people who are on the same page as you are, and certainly a sense of awareness among men as well as among women that the times they are a-changing. But, you know, don't expect the organization always to do it. Don't underestimate your own strength.
Okay, I think we are right at 2 o'clock. So unless we have a burning question.
Should we?
Okay, we're going to let you
In
make
case
it.
you haven't noticed already, we are idealists, but we're not fools. And we have been harmed, but we are not hysterical. The likelihood of us going extreme is nil. We are management consultants. We are lawyers. We are systems thinkers. We are journalists. We are structured about this. And we are absolutely intent on building it for a lasting impact. We are not unaware of the challenges of implementation or the nature of the problem. So we are going into this very mindful of the nature of the challenge and very deliberate about giving this impact its best chance at success.
And I think that's a great closing note. Thank you all. Thanks to everybody on the panel. Appreciate it. Good.
All right. Good job. Can't wait to see you.